This is definitely the most quiet beginning to a community meeting I've been a part of in a long time. Usually if it's this quiet, you're just sitting there drinking a bottled water in an empty room, wondering if you've got the right conference room. We'll get started here in about a minute with introductions, but let's let a couple people more join. Hey, Cole, can you hear me? Let's get started. You can just go to the next slide and we can go, we'll go into the meeting agenda now that we've got about 20 folks joining us and more to be hopping on.
Cool.
Amy just asked a question, is it muted for the attendees? And yeah, we can unmute people. We're just starting out with panelists and then we'll be taking questions as we go.
Yeah, and to all the panelists, you know, if you guys can keep an eye on the chat and the Q&As while we're moving in. But I think that's a great way to get started. To everybody who's joined us so far, welcome. We really want to thank you guys for making the trip to the Zoom session to have an interesting type of community meeting that hopefully won't be going on for very long. And so we want to just start with a bit of an overview. My name is Levi Johnson, and I'm helping do some organizing for Clara Brown Commons. And so today we wanted to provide an information session for the Women's Village at Clara Brown Commons. So all of the attendees are automatically muted, just so we're not hearing a lot of different background noise and we can get the clearest amount of audio possible. If you have a question, you can type it into the Q&A bar at the bottom, or if you're on the phone, you can text Dorothy at 720-987-6133. You can also raise your hand if you want to get our attention, or there's a chat feature that will go directly to the panelists if there's another way of getting our attention. So yeah, I think what we're going to do is just get started with some introductions. I would like for the panelists to all share a little bit about who you are and your background, and then what we'll do is we'll kick it to the neighbors who are joining us. And what I'll do is I will unmute one neighbor at a time, just so that we don't have 25 plus voices going on because we can't go around the room. And what we would like for you to do is just say your name, introduce yourself. What's your neighborhood connection? So you don't have to list your address or anything, but you know, you can say, like I would say, my name is Levi, I'm on 30th and Arapahoe. And then what we want to do is what we did last time at our previous meeting, which is to ask to share one word of how you feel about either Clara Brown Commons or the Women's Village at Clara Brown Commons. So you can take that however you want to interpret that. But let's start with our panelists for tonight. So maybe Cole, if we can have you start.
Yeah, I'm Cole Chandler. I'm the director of the Colorado Village Collaborative. I also live at 30th and Elizabeth, so just about 8 to 10 blocks away from the site. And I am hopeful tonight.
Great. Let's go to Dorothy.
Hello, my name is Dorothy Leyva. I am a village organizer with Colorado Village Collaborative. I am a Denver native. I went to a Denver Public High School here, and I grew up in East Denver, grew up in South Denver, and now I'm currently working in Belleville. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm excited to be part of the team.
Awesome. Let's go to Hannah.
Hey guys, my name is Hannah. I'm a village organizer with Colorado Village Collaborative, and I live in East Denver. I don't live in the neighborhood, but I live in East Denver, not too far away. And the one word I would pick is excited.
Great. And Jeff.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Johnson. I'm the director of Mile High Ministries, and I've lived here on the east side for almost 30 years, raised my family here, now helping to raise grandkids here. And all the words I've been hearing, hopeful and excited, those were the two that I plan to use, so I'll just echo those, hopeful and excited.
Great. And now we're going to go to the attendees. So the way this will work, theoretically, is I'll just say your name or whatever you typed in into the profile. So please excuse me if I'm mispronouncing your name, but I'll go through. I just want to reiterate, your name, your connection to the neighborhood, and then one word of how you feel. And then we'll move through this because we got a lot of information to share. So let's start with Stacy.
Hi, I'm Stacy Ronzi, and I have been in Denver for 20 years. I live in Uptown, and I volunteer with CVC. If you need closed captioning, by the way, it is available on the bottom of your screen.
Great, thank you. All right, Adam Bushman.
Hi there, I'm Adam Bushman. I'm an architect on the project. I live in the Baker neighborhood, and I'm grateful to be a part of this.
Great, thank you. All right, Amy Clanton.
Unmute now.
Yep.
Oh, can you hear us?
Yep.
Don Novak and Amy Clanton here. We are across the street from the park. We haven't moved in yet, but we're currently building a house just off the corner. And I've been a native of Denver, but looking forward to moving into the Cole neighborhood. I'd say our one word is interested, but unclear, and looking forward to getting some information.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go Kate Croft.
Hi, my name is Kate, and I live at 37th and Brace, so just a block away. And I would say, I'm going to cheat a little, but my word is full of anticipation.
Good. Thank you. Anthony Aragon.
Hi, good evening, Anthony Aragon. I am with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure in the Office of Community and Business Engagement. And I've spent a lot of time working with Cole and the team in the Tiny Homes Village in Globeville, and excited to be here with all of you this evening. And I would say my one word would be optimistic.
Great, thank you. We'll go with Chris Woldham.
Hi, my name is Chris Woldham. I'm a board member with the Colorado Village Collaborative, and I am going to cheat also and use someone else's word, which is hopeful.
Great, thank you. And just as a quick update, we've had a couple of people join. We're going around the virtual room right now, the Zoom room, and sharing our name, our connection to the neighborhood, and then one word of how we feel about the Women's Village at Clara Brown Commons. So let's go with Charles G. Charles, are you there? All right, we'll come back to Charles if we can get that to work. Let's go with Darlene Lozano.
Hi, I'm Darlene Lozano. My parents live in the neighborhood for 40 some years, so my word would be interested, just trying to find out information.
Great, thank you, welcome. Let's go with Emily. Emily, you there? All right, we can come back to Emily. I'm gonna keep this moving. Let's ask Deb Meyer to share.
Hi, everybody. I'm Deb Meyer, and I work at Trinity United Methodist Church, which is located at 18th and Broadway. I live in central downtown Denver, and I'm also on the Colorado Village Collaborative Board. And my word is grateful. I'm grateful for the possibility that this project brings.
Great, thank you. Let's try Emily one more time. Emily, are you there? All right, let's keep it going. Donna.
Hi, I'm Donna Bryson. I live at 38th and York, and I'm also a reporter for Denver. I write about housing, so I'm very curious.
Thanks for joining us. And thanks everybody for your patience on this. This is new for all of us. So let's go with James Encinas.
Hi, this is James. I work with the Colorado Village Collaborative with Cole and staff facilitating healing circles.
Thanks for joining us. Let's go with Georgia Gallagher. Okay.
Oh, sorry, did you not hear that?
Oops. Let's try it one more time.
I'm Georgia Gallagher with Live Sotheby's, and my word is educate. I'd like to educate myself on the project for my clients.
Great, thank you. Let's go with Sandy.
Hi, I'm Sandy Douglas. I been in Cole for about 30 plus years. I live directly across the street from Clara Commons. And right now, I guess my word is uncomfortable, uncertain.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Sandy. Sue Gomez. Sue, are you there? All right, let's go with Tiffany. Tiffany Holcomb. All right. I'm going to keep moving us through this. Sarah Stutter.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm at 36 and Race, and my word would be open.
Great, thank you. Tiffany, are you there? Are you able to unmute yourself?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, Tiffany.
Oh, I'm Sue.
Okay, hi, why don't you introduce yourself? All right, well, I'm going to move us through this, you guys. If I skip over you, or if you're able to unmute yourself later on, just message in the Q&A, or you can text Dorothy at 720-987-6133. We want to make sure we're getting introductions for everybody, but more importantly, that we're providing information for everybody who's been able to take some time out of their evening. And so just a couple of these left. Jessica Jackson. Jessica, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, there you go.
Hello?
Yep.
Hello?
Jessica.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Jessica.
Okay. I live on 36th in York and have lived in the neighborhood for most of my life. And my word would be hopeful, but suspicious. I guess that's a phrase.
I like that, yeah. It's hyphenated, it's all one word.
Right.
Hey Levi, Tiffany said she's actually signed in on 2 accounts and one of them, her mic doesn't work, but if you scroll down,
okay.
your name again.
Okay, hi, this is Tiffany. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. I was trying to get my computer sorted out. So I'm Tiffany Holcomb. I'm with the City of Denver in the Development Services Department. My role in this process is to really help facilitate getting this project through all our different permits and review cycles and systems in the city, and to make sure everything is moving smoothly, and to answer questions and to make sure everything is compliant before we issue any permits out and things like that. So my role in the meeting tonight is really to answer any questions that come up from the city process side of things. Just as a note, I am a 20-year resident of Denver, mostly Capitol Hill, and then over in the Northwest Berkeley Regis side of town, but I looked at properties over in the Cole area as well. So it's a great area. I think my word would be diversity.
Diversity, that's good. Thank you, Tiffany. All right, Jan, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oops. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I live in the neighborhood and have lived there off and on my entire life, which are decades. And my word would be curious.
Good, thank you. Thank you for joining us, Jan. And thanks again for everybody's patience. This, I promise that very soon, once things are in a different position, we will be having a Clara Brown Commons barbecue soon. So please continue to be patient. This person, I think this is calling in on a phone. This just says Galaxy. So if someone is calling in on a phone with Galaxy. If you could
that's me. My name is Dan. I've been in the neighborhood over 46 years. My parents been over here like 50. And my one word is dislike.
Dislike. Thank you, Dan. All right, Diane. Can you hear us, Diane?
Actually, this is Mercy Tucker. I'm using someone's corporate account. So I think I'm showing up as Diane. I'm in the neighborhood at 33rd and Gaylord. And I just came on. Are we saying a word?
So just you did the intro, and then just one word of how you feel about either Clara Brown Commons or the Women's Village at Clara Brown Commons.
Yeah, anticipating.
Anticipating. Thank you. Thanks, Mercy. All right, Dave.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
This is Dave Kuntz with Mortensen, just joining the call. So I'm just here to listen in. But if you want a word, I'm excited.
Great. Thanks, Dave. All right, Colin. All right, I'm going to do a couple more. When we have people join us, maybe we might come through at the end and do intros for folks who haven't been able to join us at the beginning, because I really want us to get into the content for tonight. I think that there's a wide range of where people are and with the one word, and as you guys can hear. And so what we want to do tonight is to provide information that is able to meet the needs of all of our neighbors. So I think what I would like to do now, just to be looking at the time, because we don't want to keep everybody on Zoom for too late tonight, is to kick it to Jeff Johnson to give us a bit of a story on Clara Brown Commons, and then some general updates before we move into the Women's Village portion of the night. So, Jeff, are you there?
I am, and thanks, Levi, and hi, everybody. I'm really glad that you came to be part of this meeting tonight and to be interested in what's happening. Some background about Clara Brown Commons. The organization that I work for, Mile High Ministries, is the group that's developing the property, the entire block. And we are proposing to build a 4-story apartment building along York Street on the east side of the property. And that building will have 61 apartments in it, all of them affordable, all of them below market rates, with a strong mix of different levels of affordability, but lots of units at the most affordable levels to help people who are struggling to find places that they can afford to live. Mile High Ministries is an organization that for 32 years has been serving very low income individuals and families in our city with things like affordable housing, transitional housing, legal aid, and counseling, chaplaincy, and various other kinds of supportive programs. So we're going to build a 4-story apartment building facing York Street. And then on the west side of the property facing Gaylord Street, we are partnering with Habitat for Humanity to build 17 townhomes that will be made available for sale also to people of moderate incomes, which if you know about Habitat for Humanity, you know that that's their mission, to help people who otherwise might not be able to afford to own a home to become homeowners. And then finally, as kind of a third phase to the project, on a smaller part of the block facing 37th Avenue, so on the south end, right about in the middle of the block between Gaylord and York, we plan to build a 2-story commercial building that would have some nonprofit kind of space. And the main thing that we'd like to do in that building is to have an early childhood education center to support parents in the neighborhood who need good places for young kids. And but that'll be a third phase to the project. So it'll be a few years before we build that part of the overall community. And so that's going to leave some space available for the next 2 to 3 years. And that's the space that we've invited the Colorado Village Collaborative to build a women's village, tiny home village, that we'll say more about in just a little bit. I want to say a little bit more by way of background. Our dream for this block started as long as 15 years ago. I started walking around the block. I don't live very far away, just south a few blocks. And I would walk around the block in my daily walks, sometimes walking my dog or sometimes jogging. And I, like probably a lot of you, was just offended by the way that the previous owner managed or didn't manage the property. And so then the way that property became a problem for everybody, and especially for the people who lived nearby. And I met Sandy Douglas, who mentioned that she lives right across the street from the property. I met Sandy 15 years ago, and we started sharing ideas and commiserating and lamenting about what was going on there and wondering if it would be possible to see anything good happen on this block. I began meeting with officials at the city and asking them, what's going on, and learning more about, of course, the owner, the previous owner. We tried many times to contact that owner to see if he'd be interested in parting with the property, and he wasn't. And but the one thing I did begin doing 15 years ago is praying. And I would often, like many times, perhaps hundreds of times, walk to the block, walk around it, and pray. And my prayer was simply, God, liberate this property from the current owner and put it in the hands of somebody who will do something good for our neighborhood. Well, after all those years, finally the city did take the property away from its previous owner. And then the city put the property up for auction. We found a private family foundation that was willing to partner with us and buy the property in the auction. And they now lease it to us for $1 a year and so we're busy raising money right now so that we can buy the property from them and build the development that I just told you about a few minutes ago. The last thing I'll say by way of introduction is why the property is called Clara Brown Commons. And I hope that many of you know the story of Clara Brown, who was one of Denver's original pioneers. Clara came to Denver in 1859, the first spring that there was a Denver. And she came here and she was an entrepreneur. She started a laundry business as soon as she got here and built that laundry business and leveraged that laundry business here and in Central City into a successful real estate empire. She owned lots of real estate in the area and made a lot of money. She was good at what she did. And she became a community leader, a caregiver in the community, and also one of the area's leading philanthropists. And so just those little things that I've just said about her, that's just an introduction. It's a really incredible and remarkable story. And Aunt Clara, as she was called, is buried just a couple of miles from the property in Riverside Cemetery. And she's actually buried just right off York Street, if you ever have a chance to visit her grave at Riverside Cemetery. So Clara, she's just got one of the most exciting stories and most inspiring stories that you can imagine. And we couldn't think of anybody better to be the inspiration for a community that is about helping all of us build the kind of lives that we want to share together and the kind of community that we want to be together with one another. I'll stop there. I will say, I know that one of the things that people are concerned about right now with the property is that we have some folks camping there. And so we're going to be sure to leave time later on in the meeting when we have our Q&A time to answer your questions about who's living there and how we're responding to that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think just to add to that, we want to get to information about the Women's Village. And I know that there's some neighbors who we've been in communication with and have been communicating with Cole and with Dorothy, who are organizing for the Women's Village. And so there's some questions about that we will get to. And so I want to jump in first. We had a couple new people join. Just wanted to say that if you have a question and if you're not able to type it into the Q&A feature on Zoom, you can text Dorothy at 720-987-6133. We want to make sure we get to everybody's questions and provide information. But I think what I'd like to do now is to kick it to Cole and to Dorothy to share some information about the Women's Village. But to do that, I want to read the vision statement that's there on the screen. Not everybody can see that, but this is the vision statement for Clara Brown Commons. And if you do have a visual, my background is a picture of Aunt Clara. Clara Brown Commons promotes belonging for residents and our neighbors by creating a safe and caring community where we can stabilize our lives, expand our economic capacity, and deepen spiritual connectedness. So when we thought about having this portion of the site that wouldn't be fully utilized for some years to come into the third phase of development, the vision of Clara Brown Commons really lines up with what we want to share about tonight. So Cole and Dorothy, if we can have you guys walk us through your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Levi, and everyone. I'm going to really turn it over to Dorothy to lead us through. And Dorothy texted that she's having a little trouble with her internet connection, so we'll hope she has the best connection she can get here. And if not, Hannah and I can probably fill in the blanks. But just by way of getting started, I just want to make sure to introduce myself. I'm Cole Chandler, the director of the Colorado Village Collaborative, and also one of the co-founders. We started CVC a little over 3 years ago. And when we first started, we were launching the Beloved Community Village on the other side of the Cole neighborhood. And over time, we dreamed of building a second village. And I really want to acknowledge that the dream for that second village really came from parishioners at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church. They had a specific dream to build a safe space for women experiencing homelessness, for whom there's just simply fewer options in the existing shelter system. And so as we move towards the possibility of making that dream a reality, I just want to pay homage to that vision and share that, you know, we're really here to get to know folks and share information about this and really create this as a safe space for everybody, the people that are living there and the neighbors nearby as well. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dorothy, and hopefully you get a sense of the spirit of this project.
Perfect, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So I apologize for my initial introduction. I really didn't get too much out there just because my internet connection wasn't.
Dorothy, we lost you.
Hey, Cole, let's have
Okay,
you.
background.
Yeah, that's fine.
Hello?
Yeah, you're kind of in and out there, Dorothy.
Okay. I may have to. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, why don't we do this? Cole, why don't we have you go through a couple of the next slides, and then Dorothy maybe either just restart your internet or log back in.
Okay.
And we'll jump in from there, but I want to keep us moving along. We've got a room full of neighbors, so I want to jump in.
All right, thanks, Levi.
That might be better.
Okay.
So just kind of as Levi mentioned, this is really going to be sort of a question and answer format. And, you know, we've gotten a lot of questions about this over the years as we've dreamed about standing up this project. And so the first question here is just, what is the Women's Village? And so the Women's Village is going to be 14 homes that provide safe, healing, transformational housing community for single women coming from homelessness. And so we'll show you more about what the site will look like and all those kinds of things. We'll talk more about what the services will look like on site, what the programming and operations will look like on site as we go. But really, this is intended to be a space where within 12 months, a single woman will move into the village, receive access to services, and then within a 12-month time frame, be able to move on into more stable housing. And so it'll be a space where people can really increase their economic capacity and then transform towards stable housing. All along the way, we'll be addressing the issues of trauma and offering a healing space for people coming from a variety of backgrounds. So that's a bit about what the Women's Village is. And these are actually 3 of our former residents. All 3 of these women from the Beloved Community Village actually graduated from the village and moved on into stable housing. Okay. So in terms of who will manage the Women's Village, you've heard from Dorothy tonight, and you've also heard from Hannah. Dorothy has been a village organizer with CVC for about a year, and Hannah is someone that's been interning with us as part of her master's program, and we're hiring this summer, and she'll be coming on full-time to help us get the Women's Village up and running and operational. And so these will really be the on-the-ground people that will be working day in and day out at the Women's Village and can really be a liaison to the neighborhood as well. So just a little bit about how the Women's Village will be operated. And we've kind of broken this up into 4 quadrants to share information with you. But the village organizers that you just saw, they'll be on site 5 to 6 days a week. But they're not the only staff that's there. We also have a resource navigator that provides benefit navigation, employment navigation, case management referrals, and they'll be on site 5 days a week. And then 2 days a week, we have a maintenance person that helps with our site upkeep, as you'll see. And so they'll be managing our weekly trash removal, the weed, sidewalks, snow removal when that season comes. And they'll also be doing tiny home and common house maintenance. So residents will be able to submit, you know, a request when they have a maintenance request on their house, and that maintenance person can do that. There's some very basic guidelines that all the village residents will need to uphold. One of those is observing quiet hours, which is really important in the neighborhood. The other is just very basic non-negotiable agreements around no violence, no weapons, no illegal drugs. We have guest policies and pet policies, and every resident will be required to sign a use agreement that says they understand the rules of the space, and they understand that, you know, a failure to follow those guidelines may result in some accountability. And so on the accountability side, that process is intended to be restorative to the full extent possible, but there are occasions when we do have to take a more punitive approach. And there have been times that in our previous village, we've had to remove people from the village to promote just the safest, most healing environment for all people. Dorothy, are you back?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. Sorry about all the technical difficulties. Can you hear me now? Sorry. I feel like I'm now.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an echo, but we can hear you.
Okay, give me a moment. Okay, sorry about the technical difficulties, everybody. Cole, you did a really good job of going over the slideshow. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of
Dorothy, I'll just keep going. It's no problem. So the next slide here is just answering the question, what services will be provided? And so I really mentioned that our intent here is to help people move into the village and then within a 12-month time frame to move forward. And so this is a service-rich space. We'll have a full-time resource navigator on site that's helping alongside of the village organizers. And our system is entirely integrated into the homelessness resolution system in Denver. And so the HMIS system it stands for the Homeless Management Information System. And that's a basic database that actually comes down from the National Department of Housing and Urban Development, which helps us to research and understand the way homelessness works and the ways it's most effectively resolved. But it also helps, most importantly, with housing placement for people. And so this is a system that we do data input on and data collection on every person that we interact with so that we can get them into the housing pipeline. We'll do individual goal development with residents. And so that will look like giving residents the opportunity to identify their short, medium, and long-term range goals, and then to check back in with them. We'll do wellness checks with folks that are checking in on mental and physical wellness, checking in to make sure that their house is in order and is a safe place for people to continue living. And this wellness check is obviously extremely important during the COVID pandemic. And so we're doing weekly symptom checks at our current site, and we will certainly continue doing those throughout the COVID pandemic at the Women's Village site. The resource navigator will really lead on our employment navigation front, helping people to not just fill out resumes and applications, but to obtain jobs, helping to make sure that people have access to and are receiving all the benefits that they're eligible for. And then most importantly, looking for that long-term housing outcome. Additionally, the resource navigator will be providing mental and physical health care referrals. And James Encinas, who was on the call earlier, mentioned his work with our healing circles. And so we'll be offering healing circles to village residents as well. really understanding the deep long-term generational impacts of trauma and giving our bodies and our minds an opportunity to connect and to heal. Another component that is really unique to our model is that it's community-based. And so we find ways to bring people together for community meals, gatherings, and events to really build a supportive community. A lot of folks that are living on the streets wind up there because at the end of the day, they didn't have the social network that they needed. They didn't have somebody to call when they hit rock bottom. And so we do our best to reweave that social fabric and to bring people together across divides. So the next question, one we often get is, how will residents be selected? And so what we want to emphasize here is that this is a multi-step and very thoughtful process. And the first step is a couple of things. One, it's doing street outreach, reaching out to people that are living in camps, people that are on the streets, and trying our best to extend equitable access to resources to those folks. The other piece is referrals from existing service providers. And so folks serving women in particular, that looks like the Dolores Project, St. Francis Center, Catholic Charities, et cetera. And so we'll be both doing some street outreach and also accepting referrals as a first step. And so once we get folks into that process, the second step is an application that we can fill out either over the phone or in person or online, and some entry into our system. And during that process, we do some basic eligibility determination. The third step, if people make it through those first two, is to do an interview with a selection committee. And so that selection committee involves our village organizing staff, and it also involves former or future or current residents of the tiny home village. And it will also involve neighbors. And so we're gonna have 2 seats available to members of the Cole neighborhood to participate in that interview and selection committee. The fourth step is that selection is determined by that committee, and it's really determined based upon need and fit. So we really do our best to prioritize people that have fewer options to accessing the existing system. And so that may be workforce individuals, because for the most part, the shelter system is not 24 hours, and people that have jobs have a really hard time accessing the shelter system. That could be people with pets. And so we will be a space that welcomes pets under certain guidelines and policies. And then another group of individuals that have a hard time accessing that existing system is the LGBTQ population. And so this will be a trans welcoming, trans affirmative space. And that's, something that we rank those kinds of situations higher in terms of need. And then additionally, this isn't a program that's well suited for everybody. And it requires the ability to live somewhat more independently than some settings do. And so we'll be, making sure that the folks that are selected in that fourth step are really a good fit and can really come into the Women's Village and succeed. And then our fifth step is housing in a tiny home. And that includes an intake process, the HMIS data collection process that I mentioned. We have an initial intake form that we'll do with people. And it's also a signed use agreement, and that's required for being able to move into the Women's Village.
Hey, Cole, real quick, I'm gonna pause you right there, and thank you for going through the steps. I think we have Dorothy back on, but before we continue on the presentation, I want to just confirm we have some new folks too. So what we're doing is we're providing information. If you have a question about the Women's Village at Clairemont Commons, you can type it into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom feature, or you can text Dorothy, and her number is at the bottom of every slide there, but it's 720-987-6133. We want to make sure that we're addressing some of the commonly asked questions in this presentation, but some of the more specific ones that come up throughout the night. So if you have a question and if you're not getting it answered, either put it in the Q&A the chat will go to all panelists, or you can text Dorothy. So I just wanted to note that for folks who are new. Let us keep going.
Yeah. Hey, Cole, I'm in now, so I can actually, I know it's just this slide that's left, but I think it's actually pretty good that I'm able to talk about this, just because my role as a village organizer is also a community liaison. And so that has what my role has been in Globeville is really talking to the neighbors within directly adjacent to the village, as well as in the surrounding neighborhood, and just again, just talking and understanding and engaging and answering any questions that come along. So in this slide, you could see how can neighbors be involved. You know, going into Globeville, it was a tumultuous relationship, but over time we have started building that relationship. And it was because of education and being supportive, and the Globeville neighborhood also volunteering and also bringing over meals to the villagers. Also just getting to know some of the residents. I know a lot of times there's a lot of fear that comes along with the unknown. And so as a village organizer, myself and Hannah can utilize our role to help educate and also just be liaisons for the neighborhood and the village. Because one of the things that really stands out to me with this is the community support. One of the things is that the residents are indeed part of the community. And I have just a quick story about what that means. So some of our villagers actually used the bus at RTD and noticed there was a ton of trash. And going to some of the registered neighborhood meetings in Globeville, they had the same concerns. And so what the village did on their own is they asked if they can adopt the RTD stop, and they put in the application and it got approved. So we finally got a trash can over in the area. And, you know, it's things like that that helps build community. And, you know, it's just very important that, you know, you know that you do have village organizers as your liaisons.
Awesome. Thank you, Dorothy. So I'm sure there's lots of questions about what the Women's Village will look like. And we've been working with the Shears, Adkins, and Rockmore architecture firm, and also Shopworks Architecture, to come up with a site plan and layout for this space. And so first of all, this first picture, we're just showing what the entire block will look like. And so I want you to see that these 14 homes are going to be taking up a very small portion of this entire block. And as Jeff mentioned earlier, you know, long-term along York Street, you're going to have an affordable housing development that will be over here. Along Gaylord, long-term, there's going to be 17 for-sale townhomes in partnership with Habitat for Humanity. And then long-term here along 37th Avenue, we hope there will be an early childhood education center. But in the meantime, we have the opportunity to activate this basically 8,000 square foot space by putting 14 tiny homes here. And through some design led by Shears, Adkins, and Rockmore, we found ways to reduce the total distance required between the homes and really be able to get a good amount of density on that small spot. So I'll just show you a couple more slides here that kind of zoom in and show a little bit more about what that looks like. So this is again an aerial view, and you can see the site entry will happen here along 37th Avenue. Basically, there will be an entry gate that kind of opens up to this deck. And so if you were walking into the village, you would really feel like you were being brought onto the deck of this community center. And so this community center is really the heart and soul of the space. This is where people gather for meals. It's where we have those community potluck dinners. It's where people get to know one another, and we have healing circles and those sorts of things. This is where villagers will be, you know, coming and going on a daily basis, cooking meals together, you know, taking showers, doing those kinds of things. And so this deck is going to be really nice. It's south facing, so it'll get, you know, the sun during, you know, the winter time, and really be a 3 or 4 season space for us. Here you'll have, you know, 3 homes, and all the homes sort of open towards one another and communicate with one another so that we can really build community in the space. Here in the middle, we'll have a bit of a greenway that just kind of comes up to these stairs on the deck. And I'll point out that within this community building, there's 2 full bathrooms. This is an ADA accessible unit, and this is this is the ADA accessible shower unit, and this is a unit with a bathtub. There's a janitorial closet with a mop sink. There's an office space where village organizers and the other service providers will be able to deliver services and be on site and in the village, 5 to 6 days a week. There's also a space for laundry, and then the full kitchen over here. And so all this will be connected into water and sewer, and it'll be a really great heart and soul of the community for us. So that's a bit of that. Just in terms of more of the look, this is kind of what it might look like standing on the ground and looking at these units. And so basically the way that these units were designed was Shears, Adkins, and Rockmore actually came to the existing tiny home village and had just an information gathering session with the residents that have been living in those homes. And they found out, what did people like about their existing homes? What did they not like? And so we in many ways kept the same look and feel from our original set of homes with the metal panel and sort of the wood along the front. But we did some things to really bring in extra light. And so there's a lot more windows in these spaces. This, double door really opens up onto a deck. And, we found ways to personalize the units with different color awnings and things like that. The unit is also going to be able to be heated and cooled more efficiently. And all that was really based upon input that SAR received from the folks that have actually lived in these units over the last few years.
Hey, Cole, real quick, can you go back to that last slide?
Oh,
and, yep. And just for the folks who are on their phone, we will be following up we can send this to everybody who's been in attendance. We'll be posting this online, both on myclarabrowncommons.com as well as through social media. But with that image there, the image I'm referencing answers one of the questions that was asked. Jan asked, are they going to be there long-term or short-term? And so if you want to speak to the sort of the bottom portion of the homes there and
sure.
Question.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Jan. And so if you're looking at the diagram here, you'll see that what these homes sit on is a temporary foundation system. And so these homes were designed to meet the full building code. They meet energy code, building code, fire code. But what's really unique about them is they have a temporary foundation system. And that's because after 2 to 4 years, these homes will be moved to another site somewhere else in the city. We don't know what that location will be yet, but they will only be on the site for 2 to a maximum of 4 years. And, it's kind of unique from a design perspective because we have to meet all the code requirements, and we have to be able to withstand wind and snow load, but we also want a unit that's mobile, and we don't want to spend a lot of money on a foundation system that we're going to leave behind. So SAR did a great job of designing this foundation system, which we can just pick up by hand, but tie down and meet all the structural components on for the short term. So thanks for that question.
And there's another question before we jump into the next piece. You mentioned spending money and as well as the timeline. And so Amy asks, can you speak to the funding sources and timeline? So you touched on that there, but I think that'd be good.
Great. Yeah, so I have a slide coming up on the timeline, and I can talk about that a bit more here in a moment. In terms of funding sources, this is a privately funded effort. And so for a number of years, we've been raising money towards this. Some initial money was given by the Next 50 initiative, which specifically supports older adults, 50 and older. And so we're going to have 2 units within this 14-unit village that are set aside specifically for women that are 50 and over. And that's a really important thing for us to be able to serve that population. And then, so there's that piece and of the financial picture, but then there's also been, many donors over the years that have given to this effort, both large and small amounts. And then one of the really significant things that's really helping us move this along is the Mortensen Construction Company is making a significant in-kind donation of services towards this effort. And so we're really excited to be partnered with Mortensen, and Dave from Mortensen is on this call listening in today and really helping us lead our permitting efforts. But Mortensen's efforts are really going to propel us across the finish line and help us turn this dream into a reality here. So all the funding sources are private, but it's through different companies and foundations and individual donors.
I just want to say I'm recording all of the questions in the Q&A and in the chat, so we can get through the informational slides, and then during the Q&A we can answer them. Just so you guys know, I'm not ignoring you. I'm recording them.
Thanks, Anna. And so this is just an image of kind of what it'll look like inside of a unit. And so the way SAR designed this was that you would have 2/3 of the unit for living space and then 1/3 for rest. And so you can see that over here, you have the opportunity for some built-in desk and shelving and closet space and those kinds of things. And then over here, we actually have the opportunity to do, a bed with storage and really provide people a space to rest. And, this has been part of our advocacy effort around tiny home villages for so long, is that people need a place where they can go inside and lock a door, and they need 4 walls to heal and a place to leave their possessions when they go out to look for a job or go to work, so that they're not carrying everything with them every single day. And one of the strengths of this model that we didn't even realize was, when global pandemics strike, this provides people a space to have some isolation and really stay safe and healthy. And so it's just an incredibly important intervention for homelessness during this time when congregate facilities are really unhealthy. This provides us the opportunity to provide that social distancing and the space that people really need to heal in more ways than one. So this is just another image of the community building, which I talked about. The most amazing thing on here is going to be the deck. If you haven't driven by the village in Globeville, you should. It's at 4400 Pearl Street, and you can see a great deck over there that we're going to try to emulate with this space. So in terms of the timeline, this timeline here is showing us really what 2020 looks like. And obviously 2020 has been a different year than we expected. When we sat down to make our plans at the beginning of the year, none of us knew what was going to happen in March and completely transform all of our thoughts about the whole world. But this process began really before January 2020. It's been conversations with Mile High Ministries, conversations with folks in the Cole neighborhood over many years. Actually, one of the initial meetings that I had with Jeff about this site was having coffee with Mike Dugan and Jeff at Coffee at the Points, back when it was possible to go sit down and have a cup of coffee with somebody back a couple of years ago. And so for over a year, we've been talking with neighbors one-on-one about this project, understanding whether or not this might be something that could be viable. But we really kind of kicked that off in a more formal way at the beginning of this year. And then on March 5th, we had a community meeting in person. About 30 people gathered over across the street from the site, and we shared our story and our dreams and our hopes for the success of this space. And then obviously things got derailed a bit after March 5th as the world changed. But here we are on May 28th, having this community meeting. We're very close to permit submittal and review, and really in the construction preparation schedule, making a construction schedule, beginning to think about procuring items such as the community building and ordering metal panel and all those kinds of things that go into that whole process. And beginning around the beginning of July, we'll hit our next phase, which is the construction phase. And so around the beginning of July, you'll start to see a temporary construction fence go up to fence off the site. You'll see a bit of site work begin to take place. It's nothing like you know, the future site work that will take place there, because everything we're doing is just on grade. There's not a lot of digging that has to occur. And then you'll begin to see tiny homes being built and the community building arriving on site. And so all that will be taking place beginning of July. And one of the, you know, great things about this model is that it's not a 2-year construction process. It's a 2-month construction process. And so our schedule has us opening this village around the beginning of September. And so around that time, you'll have 14 new neighbors that are moving in and integrating into the community in some of the ways that Dorothy has suggested.
I'll also do real quick, but before we go into the broader Q&A, that timeline, if you could go back to that slide, the timeline that we're looking at here is specifically for the Women's Village. But if you were to zoom out and look from the Clara Brown Commons perspective, there has been a very long timeline of community organizing. We did a 3 neighborhood engagement series over the course of a couple of years before the rezoning. There's been a pretty extensive community engagement and outreach process. We haven't been able to speak to every single neighbor within a mile, which we would like to. And so there will be folks that are hearing about Clara Brown Commons for the first time in a year or 2 from now. But what you're seeing there with that timeline is in addition to and added on to a couple years of organizing for the long-term vision. And this is the temporary timeline. And so I wanted to just make that known. And then also just to reiterate with the next slide, you can show that. We've had a couple people share their questions. And so I want to just come back and say you can share in the Q&A down below. And if you do not have the ability to type in, or if you're calling in on your phone, you can text Dorothy at 720-987-6133. We want to make sure we're getting everybody's questions answered. So let's just jump right in. We have a couple of questions that I want to kick to you guys. And so Sandy asks, why does the village have to move after 1 to 4 years?
Great, thank you for that question, Sandy. I'll take that. You know, we've really been working hard with the city of Denver to establish a permitting pathway and be able to understand what a tiny home village is over the last couple of years. When we first began our pilot project, we only had a 6-month permit, and that's why that village has actually been on 3 sites during its life. But last year, through a long community engagement process that was part of a bigger group living advisory committee and overhaul of the group living uses in the Denver zoning code, we created a first of its kind pathway in the zoning code called a temporary tiny home village. And that allows for a temporary tiny home village to be permitted for 6 months to 12 months if it does not tap into water and sewer. So if it only has portable toilets and things like that, it can exist for 6 to 12 months, or it can exist for 2 to 4 years if it does tap into water and sewer and has the permanent bathroom facilities. And so this space is along that permitting timeline. We're also working to eventually create zoning for something like a permanent tiny home village. But we feel that it's important to have access to both temporary uses and permanent uses, because the reality is that you know, land is hard to come by, it's very expensive, and what we're able to do is just what we're doing here, which is activate a vacant lot while a longer term development plan is coming up. And so you know, one of the things that I know is going on the site right now is camping, for instance, and that's something that happens on vacant lots, and that was something that occurred on our previous lots that were vacant before activating them as well. But once we activated those sites, you know, those kinds of uses went away. And so we're eager to be able to activate the site on a temporary basis while the longer term project continues to go through its long development timeline.
Another question. Well, yeah, so I would also say too that so that was a great answer, Cole. Thinking about the technical aspect and things about permitting and the relationship with the city, and then from a broader perspective with Clara Brown Commons, you know, these will move after, you know, these are temporary, because the long-term vision of there being permanently affordable housing, both for sale with Habitat for Humanity and with Clara Brown Commons, you know, and then a future, hopefully an ECE, there will be a permanent community there. And so this is sort of in lieu of there being an empty lot or just a construction site. And so one of the other questions is, will these homes be the first construction on site? So let's see, Jeff, if you want to answer that.
Yes, and I don't have video anymore, so I'll just, you'll hear me talking about this. But yes, the tiny homes, the 14 tiny homes, and then the community space for the tiny home villagers will be the first thing that gets built, and that'll get built, as Cole was saying, we'll start with construction in July. The bigger projects are still a couple of years away. It's a long, slow process to raise all the money for constructing the apartment building and the other phases of the project. So those are still probably 2 years away.
Great, thank you. Another question is, do you know what they're going to put on that piece of land after this? And so if you want to, Jeff, speak to the long-term vision of that, the southern portion of the site.
Yes, the long-term vision for the very same space where the tiny homes village will be, oh, there, I got my video back, good, is for a 2-story commercial building, about 8,400 square feet. And the primary use of that on the first floor will be for early childhood education. And then the second floor will be some nonprofit space and offices.
Great, thank you. We had a couple more people join, so I just want to say, and I don't think Dorothy's received any texts yet, so we want to make sure we're getting to everybody's questions here in the Zoom feature, but we don't want to miss anybody. So if you do have any questions, you can text Dorothy at 720-987-6133. We have another question. So do you have information on the other 2 phases of the project? Are they funded already, and what is the estimated timeline on those?
They're not funded already, but we're making good progress. The main funding vehicle for building affordable housing really anywhere in the United States is the low-income housing tax credit, which is a vehicle that combines a tax credit with an investment by a private entity to build affordable housing. And we, when an organization wants to access those tax credits, they apply for them to the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. And usually you have to apply 2 or 3 times before you get them. They're highly competitive. We applied for them this winter and we got turned down, but they really liked the project. So we'll apply for them again this summer and hope that by the end of this year we'll receive those tax credits. And then that would be huge if that happens. And then in addition, one of the things that makes this project unique in terms of building affordable housing in Colorado is that there's going to be a large infusion of private philanthropy. So we're doing a capital campaign to raise $4.1 million to help pay for this project, to help build the housing. And we've raised $3.7 million of that. So we're thrilled about that. And then trying to figure out where to find that last $400,000 to complete the capital campaign. And then
I'll drop a Venmo link here in the Zoom, and you guys can we can do that just while we're here.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, if we could raise that tonight, that would be really great. And then of course, Habitat for Humanity, it's a little bit different model because they'll buy that strip of the land from us, the west strip along Gaylord, build the townhomes and then sell those townhomes to qualified families. So that's where the financing really comes from to build those.
And thinking about the long-term vision of Clara Brown Commons, we have a question. This is from Tracy. I understand with the current CCD requirements on parking does not really require parking due to York Street and the RTV bus stop, but as Mile High Ministries planning to provide parking, parking is becoming an issue.
Yes, parking is always a big issue. Yes, the way we've got it planned right now is that our design is one-to-one, one parking space for each permanent unit on the property. And the parking is in the middle of the property. So the housing is all around the east and west edges, and the parking is in the middle of the space.
Another question is, can you speak to the affordability for the long-term rentals? Like, will there be any market rate?
There will be no market rate units in the building. There will be 16 units, which is about a third of the units will be at 20 or 30% of area median income, or AMI. A little over half of the units total will be at 50% of AMI or below. And then I think there are 12 units that will be 60% of AMI and 12 units at 80% of AMI. So it's a really good mix.
Great, thank you. This is a question I think for Dorothy and Cole. Will you charge participants rent?
Hey, Cole, I can answer this one. Hello?
You're good to go, Dorothy.
Okay, sorry about that. So the participants do not pay rent. What they do have to do is follow the use agreement. And part of that is participation in Village, as well as participation in their progress towards permanent housing. So we do, again, have the navigator that works with individuals to set goals. We also have a chore system that goes along, and participation that the villagers do have to abide by along with the use agreement.
Great, thank you. So we have another question. We briefly spoke to this before, but I think it'd be good to address again. This has come up several times. How will you prevent the spread of COVID-19?
Dorothy, do you want to talk about the process that we're using currently?
Yeah. So of course, COVID, it came about and it kind of rocked everyone's world. And so as a community, we did follow guidelines when it comes to CDC. So we, of course, promoted, and we had signs of hand washing and the sanitary and the cleanliness of the community space as well as the homes. And so it's promoting that. We're also doing symptom checks with individuals on mostly a daily basis, or whenever we talk with individuals to see if there's any symptom checks. Another thing that we did during the actual stay-at-home order was enforce a strict guest policy. And the good thing about being a shared governance is that the village was completely on board with not allowing guests in and out of the village, because we do have some very high-risk individuals that if they contracted COVID, it would be deathly for them. So we, the village in itself, came up with the strict guest policy, and we've been adhering to that this whole time, and we're going to continue to do that. I know COVID's not gone. I don't see it going anywhere soon. So we are going to continue to keep strict policies when it comes to continued symptom checks and also, making sure individuals are going to the doctor when needed.
Thanks, Dorothy. Kind of speaking about checks, we have another question. Do they still get drug tested to be able to stay in the homes?
Dorothy, do you want to speak to our drug policy?
Yeah. So we are a low barrier village. And so what that means is there are no illegal drugs allowed on the site. And that is part of the orientation when an individual comes. We let them know we are not a substance abuse location, nor do we condone any type of legal drug activity. We have strict policies in place. If anyone is alleged to be doing any type of hard drugs, we do have access to asking for a drug test. But then, we also bring about it in a restorative way where if an individual does admit that they have any type of drug problem, then we do help them get into into services. And so as long as they are showing any progress towards wanting to recover, that is something that we will promote. But again, at the village, we do not allow any type of hard drugs on site.
And I also think that brings up something that came up in the longer organizing process for Clara Brown Commons when this was an idea a couple years ago, thinking about a temporary use for a small portion of the site. And so when this was brought up, the organizing group for Clara Brown Commons and Mile High Ministries as the developer sort of went through that first pass and said, since we're being the stewards of this property and really fostering the long-term vision for Clara Brown Commons, we don't want to have a temporary use of the site that really either undermines or draws a different vision for what Clara Brown Commons can become and what we're working very hard to build. And so things like drug policy, things like involving neighbors in the selection committee, things around design, safety, all of those kind of features were addressed way upstream to even get to this point where we're coming to provide information for the neighbors. And so drug policy is one of those, and things around behavior. And I do want to just applaud you guys with the amount of organizing you do, 5 to 7 days per week with the villagers. There's a lot of management, there's a lot of services that are being provided. And so we'll speak to that a little bit more, but I want to get to another question. This is from Winton. I see the village will only occupy a small portion of the full block vacant lot. Will the perimeter of the total lot be secured with fencing, or will just the village be fenced? Jeff, if you want to answer this one, sort of based on the construction timelines for Habitat for Humanity and then the Clara Brown Commons building.
Yes, well, obviously, as when the construction begins on the larger project, then everything will be fenced off because of all the construction taking place on there. I'll be honest and say we haven't completely decided whether or not to fence off the entire perimeter yet, but I think it's a good idea. And so it's something we're actively talking about. And, until recently, we hadn't felt a need to do that, but now we think that might be a good idea. And then I think once the village is there, the tiny homes village, and then, it will have its own fence, enclosed space, but then I think it would be a good idea to fence off the entire perimeter of the property.
Yeah, and then do you want to, since you were talking about just, the fact that there's not a fence around the entire property now, and then given the coronavirus realities and what's going on with the city and with the world, but just thinking about some of the temporary camping that's happening there now, that's a question that's come up a couple times.
Sure, I can introduce that topic and others of you can weigh in as well. For the last couple of weeks, we've had 4 and sometimes 5 people living in the public right-of-way, in other words, in the space between the sidewalk and the street along Gaylord Street at the west edge of the property. And they've had up to 4 different tents or kind of tent-like structures that they've built. And so obviously this is an expression of a larger crisis in housing that's taking place not only across our city, but across the country. And it's something that concerns us deeply and then also arouses our compassion for people who are in such a difficult struggle at this time in life. And I've been so really, frankly, I've been really moved by our neighbors on Gaylord Street and 37th Avenue who have been rightfully responsible and concerned about what's happening there, but also have been compassionate about the difficult situation that these folks are facing. We've been engaging them between Mile High Ministries, my team, and the Colorado Village Collaborative team. We've been engaging the folks who live there really every day, and sometimes a couple of times a day. I stop by every morning on my way to work and every evening on the way home just to see how things are going, to talk to whoever might be there. Dorothy and the CVC team have been going there often to meet with the campers, find out what their situation is. And then maybe Dorothy, I'll let you talk about what the process has been like with them and what we're hoping that can happen in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely. So it mainly has been engaging with the campers and also in a way being a liaison to the adjacent neighbors. We have been able to find out a lot of information about the campers and also just providing resources to them. We're deeply connected with a lot of the homeless resources that are out there. So we are trying to understand what the needs of these individuals are so that we can see how we can help them either move into a shelter or another area. We already have some plans moving forward this weekend for 2 of the individuals that will be leaving this weekend, and then also making referrals out for one of the residents to possibly become a villager over in Globeville. But we are working with them to try to see what resources are available.
And yeah, I want to add to that too. Thanks, Dorothy. That's a great response. I think in a small, this was not a part of the plan, and I think our relationship with the immediately adjacent neighbors and creating those open lines of communication is how both of these teams have been able to address this. But in a small way, this is sort of a microcosm or represents the longer term vision of Clara Brown Commons, thinking about that spectrum of housing and providing full affordability from the 20% of AMI level to then thinking about Habitat for Humanity with for sale ownership. And then so it really made sense to think about the temporary women's village as sort of that sort of upstream moment where folks are stabilizing their lives. And one of the initial visions was, and I think a vision of success for this project would be that women who are residents of the village can then move into, they can stabilize their lives and then move into Clara Brown Commons when the ribbon gets cut there. And that's sort of one of our long-term goals. And so thinking even about before there's even the women's village there's some temporary camping. And so the team has done a really great job of saying, okay, how can we be responsible? How can we address this quickly? But without just having it move on, get folks connected to services, and then hopefully potentially even get folks into the village in Globeville. So I think it's sort of a great example of the ethos that the group moves with, but then also the ability to navigate all the different systems and providers. So I think kind of a little bit along that line, we have a question that was asked. Are there any specific needs or ways that the neighborhood can get involved or support? So I'll kick that to the team.
Dorothy, you want to take that one in terms of ways neighbors can engage with the Women's Village?
Yeah, we can definitely talk about what that would look like. Once the Women's Village is up and running, again, a lot of the engagement with the community has been with either volunteering at the village. We have some neighbors in Globeville who have got to know some of the residents really well, and they volunteer. One of the community members actually has a bus and asked if any of the residents needed a ride to the grocery store. So it's just getting involved in different ways. We also really enjoy community events, and that I know, again, COVID kind of changed things a lot, But prior to COVID, what we would have was community potlucks, and it was just a great way to show community together, to break bread together and get to know one another. So it's going to be a little different as again, COVID is in our face, but there's a lot of ways that the neighbors can help and support. Yeah.
Let me say one other thing and put in a plug for the advisory committee that we will have once the Women's Village gets up and running. Anthony Aragon, who's with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, has helped us to establish an advisory committee in the Globeville neighborhood. And that's something that Anthony has said he's willing to help us do in the Cole neighborhood as well. And so really what the advisory committee is intended to do is to create a consistent chain of communication between the neighborhood and the village. And so we have monthly meetings that we do with our advisory committee where we provide updates about what's going on in the village, updates about what's going on in the neighborhood, and we collaborate on different ideas and troubleshoot ideas and figure out how we can make everything run safely and smoothly for everybody. And so that's a way to participate as kind of an entry point into participation for those that you know, are looking to have one more thing on their schedule. It's a great opportunity to add something, but it's also just kind of an entry point into building a deep and ongoing relationship with the residents of the village and also with the organization itself.
I just wanted to add to that too, that we're always taking donations depending on what we need at the time. So a lot of people in the community have helped us furnish Beloved Community Village, which was really helpful. And we're actually opening an office space too, which would be super helpful. So you can always reach out to us if you need, you know, if you have questions about what kind of donations we're taking at that time.
I would also say too that one of the best things that the immediate sort of adjacent neighbors, but then thinking about the broader context into Cole, Clayton, Whittier, really this part of the east side, is to think about open communication with the panelists who are here. All of our information will be provided. You know, so when you see something or when you have an idea, or if there is an issue, to bring it up and to bring it up in real time. And we've really tried to do a very consistently good job of responding to everything. You know, you never know what you're going to wake up to a random text. There's very specific challenges about building on this site. Historically, it's got a lot of context, and so I would say too is to stay involved. And so if you want to volunteer or if you want to donate, all those are great. But I would even say if you have a hesitation, or if there's some skepticism, or if you have a question, even if it's critical or if there's opposition, we really want to engage and be a good neighbor in this process. You know, obviously we haven't built anything yet, and this has been years and years of organizing. And what we have been doing is building relationships with neighbors. And it sounds cheesy, but it is true. But that's really the foundation that we're building Clara Brown Commons on, and that's the vision that Aunt Clara really lived with. And so we'll make sure that everybody who's attending tonight has our information. Another question is kind of along those lines. Jen asked, are you going to email us about future meetings? Yes, if we don't have your email, make sure that you either drop your email in the chat or in the Q&A feature. You can also text Dorothy your email address, 720-987-6133. And then also stay updated at myclarabrowncommons.com. And we're going to really try to update the neighborhood with future meetings, events, FAQs, updated renderings. So I want to make sure you guys have either drop your information if you haven't received an email from us yet, or make sure you're following us online. There's a sign up form on the website. Okay, we have another question. This was emailed to us earlier. Because the proposed site is so close to an elementary school and park, how will the safety of the neighborhood be ensured? And so Dorothy, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, definitely. So our current village in Globeville is about 4 blocks away from an elementary school as well. And you know, so with the resident selection, one of the things that we do is a sex offender check. So anyone who is a registered sex offender is not allowed to be at any of our villages or be a resident at the village. And so that is very important to us that we abide by that. And then also in regards to any type of violence or conflict resolution, you know, that is something that we handle. You know, we engage with the neighbors, and we understand there's a fear of possible violence going on, and that's completely understandable. But you know, staff is on call for situations that arise, and there are sometimes that police have to be called, and that's in any type of neighborhood. One of the things with the village is, you know, we noticed that there hasn't been a lot of police contact because, you know, we have resolved conflict within the village, and that's one of the primary goals is teaching those conflict resolutions to the villagers.
That's great, thank you. There's another question about sort of guest policy for overnight visitors. So do you guys have a policy for that, and how do you handle extended stay and overnight guests?
Well, currently, so again, with the Women's Village, it is going to be a little bit different than how we have at the Beloved Community Village, where we have individuals as well as couples that are able to stay at the Beloved Community. So at the Women's Village, there are going to be guests allowed. And again, it's not a domestic violence shelter in any sense, but we do want to be sensitive to any of the individuals that you know, may need some additional services when it comes to any type of trauma or assault when it comes to that. So at this point, we are going to have a guest policy where individuals can have guests that come visit, but when it comes to overnight guests, there's going to be a policy in place, as well as we're going to look into what the extended stay guest policy will be for that. At this point, we are not anticipating having extended stay guests at the Women's Village at this point. And so, yeah, we're going to continue looking at that policy moving forward.
Dorothy, have you received any questions via text that you want to address, or that we haven't addressed yet that you might have received?
No, I don't have any text.
There's one more question in the Q&A. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, okay, I see that. Yep, Jen asks, since there is an area designated for the Women's Village, what would be the possibility of making a men's village after the little homes are moved? Jeff, if you want to speak to what comes after these get removed.
Sure, yeah, I can speak to that. The Women's Village will be welcome to stay there right up until we're ready to build the next building, the permanent building that will go on that site. And so, no, there wouldn't be a possibility then of having a men's village or any other kind of housing on that site, because we'll build a permanent building when the Women's Village vacates the spot.
I'll also add that the permanent building that will go there, we keep mentioning an ECE. That's not something we just randomly came up with. That came from our organizing efforts for Clara Brown Commons. We started with knocking on doors. We did surveys. We had a couple of meetings, and one of the questions that we asked was, what is a great use of this commercial part of the property? What would be something that you would want to see in your neighborhood and that you would feel proud of? And so we want this to be something that meets the needs of the neighborhood. And one of the answers that kept getting brought up, and that was reinforced and stressed at every single meeting, thankfully, was to have an early childhood education center, and one that's affordable, not an expensive ECE, but something that is for the neighbors who have younger kids or grandkids. And so, you know, we're working hard to make that a reality. But when we keep mentioning that ECE, this is not just going to be a random building that pops up and then we figure out what to do with it. we're organizing now to make that a reality. If you guys have any more questions, you can put them in the Q&A, and I'll give it another minute or so. We haven't had any recent questions, but there is one other question that Sandy asked. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to address this. Sandy asks, is the village a done deal?
Yes, we have a lease with the Colorado Village Collaborative. So we're legal and ready to move forward.
I think there was one question we might have skimmed over, and it was, are the residents going to be there long or short term?
I'll speak to that. As I mentioned in the presentation, our target timeline for moving residents into the village and then graduating from the program and moving on into permanent housing is 12 months. And that's not just a number that we, dreamed up. It's based upon our actual real data from the pilot project. And so the pilot project has served 30 unique people over its 3 years of existence, and 8 people have graduated from the village and moved on into stable housing. And the average timeline for those 8 graduates was 12 months. And so that's our target for this program, is to bring women into the village, provide them with ample resources and services, and be able to graduate people into stable housing and really create a pipeline into stable housing for people coming from homelessness.
Thanks, Cole. We have a couple more questions. This one was asked earlier, but I think this speaks to some of the engagement with the neighborhood. And so there was a question about having renderings of the vision of Clare Brown Commons placed on boards on the site, so that the Women's Village is seen in the broader context of Clare Brown Commons, which we do plan on doing. Like I mentioned earlier, even though you can do years of organizing, you're not able to reach every single neighbor. And so there will be people who will drive by, and the first thing that they will see will be the Women's Village, and it'll be easy for them to drive by or walk away with the assumption that that's what the entire property is going to be. So we also are relying on you guys in the neighborhood to share this vision and to update your neighbors, and to help tell that story and update folks. But the end of it, there was a question of thinking about having something low cost that the community can engage in early, like a garden. Is there anything like that planned to minimize the, quote, vacant lot syndrome in the couple of years it takes to start on the overall project? Cole or Dorothy, are we going to do anything like a community garden, or any ways that we can engage the neighborhood?
Thanks for that question. I can actually go back a couple spaces here and show really our overall site layout. This white space in the middle is going to be green space, and we dream of working with neighbors, working with volunteers, your business, your congregation, your neighborhood organization, to build garden boxes and make that into a community garden. Obviously, that would first and foremost be of service to the people that live in the village, but that is certainly a hope, and it's something that we've done at the village in Globeville. We actually had some volunteer groups help us build garden boxes that we put along the public right-of-way there, and so we hope to do that again. So yeah, thank you.
Another question, and this ties back to the earlier piece that you mentioned about the code. And then also, Jeff, if you want to speak to the rezoning, but one question was, why wasn't this, and I'm assuming this meaning the Women's Village, why wasn't this voted on?
Yeah, the what we did do, as Levi referred to earlier, was a really extensive community outreach process over the last couple of years. A number of different neighborhood meetings that were well attended, where the overall vision was shared. And then the particular women's village, this is the second community meeting that we've had related to this particular part of the vision. So, so we have done a lot of door knocking and reaching out to people and you know, processing the idea, sharing the idea over the course of a couple of years. That process, a lot of that was tied to a rezoning of the property. When we first purchased the property, it was zoned in a way that only larger homes, perhaps townhomes, could be built on it. But with the price of land, there was no way to build anything that would be affordable on the site, given the extensive cost of land. And our vision was to be able to provide more affordable housing for people in our neighborhood. So we needed to rezone the property, and that's an extensive process, and that was voted on by City Council.
Nicole, do you want to maybe speak to I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the recent updates to the code and what gets voted on and what doesn't?
Yeah, and so like I mentioned, for really almost 3 years, we worked on developing the code piece of this, and it was an extensive citywide process that involved you know, input from stakeholders all over the city, folks that have lived near a tiny home village in the Cole neighborhood and the Globeville neighborhood, and other people that were interested in the idea, registered neighborhood organization members, planning board members, and on and on. And so that process went forward and was adopted formally into the Denver zoning code back in October. And what the process allows really is use by right for a temporary tiny home village to private landowners in zone districts all across the city. Basically every single zone district, with the exception of open space, is permitted to have a temporary tiny home village at this point. And that was really important because when we were first working to stand up the first tiny home village and move the first tiny home village, we really ran into a spot where we kind of got stuck and weren't sure where we could put it. And so getting that code passed through really allowed us to have the ability to use land in this way for this purpose all across the city. And so what that process requires is a community information meeting to provide information on the project. And, you know, hopefully that's just the bare minimum, because what we're really hoping to do is develop relationships, and have been doing that over time. And so, you know, our purpose here is to share information. This is not the first meeting, and it's certainly not the last. And we invite people to continue to engage in the process, to come out for a groundbreaking in July, and come out for an opening in September, and to keep diving in and being a part of the community over the couple years that we're there and beyond, as it lives fully into its vision as the Clara Brown Commons.
Thanks, Cole. Yeah, I think that ties back to what I was communicating earlier, that we really want an open and transparent relationship with the neighbors, and have those lines of communication that are very clear and consistent. If you've been in Denver for 6 months or 6 decades, you know that in the last kind of recent chapter in Denver's history, there's been a big boom in construction. And one of the challenges and things that we want to get away from is where you're driving on your regular route to work or to your friend's house, and you see a building, an entirely new building where there wasn't one before. And so we've been doing years of organizing, but it's still going to continue because we want to be able to address the ideas and the concerns and the opportunities that neighbors bring. And to that point, I think if you guys are interested in some of the community organizing work that was done for Clara Brown Commons and how that is getting tied to design, programming, please drop your email into the chat. or text Dorothy at 720-987-6133, or put it into the Q&A, and we can follow up with sort of an overview of the history of some of the organizing and how that's tied to what people will see, because we don't want to have neighbors drive by and then all of a sudden one day there's a brand new permanent feature in their neighborhood. We want Clara Brown Commons to be a really beloved asset in the neighborhood. And so to that point, I'll kind of start to wrap up by saying this. When we began the process by doing a value survey. Before we were talking about zoning and massing and how tall and step downs and setbacks and all that kind of stuff, playing with Legos on tables. We really wanted to understand the values of the neighborhood. And so one of the questions in that survey that we did twice was, when this process is over, how do you want Clara Brown Commons to make you feel? And 75% of the respondents said something similar to either proud or prideful, that whenever I walk by or drive by, I want to see something in my neighborhood that I feel proud that I had an idea for, or that I had a hand in making become a reality. And so we want to extend that into this process. And so we're very open, so please make sure that we have your information, but we will still be knocking on doors, passing out flyers, social media, and the website. I kind of want to give us one last chance, if anybody has a question, to either drop it into the Q&A. This is not the last bite at the apple, so to speak. We will be doing more community meetings, and you can always email us or text us, and we'll get your question answered as well. I'm going to give it another minute or two, but Cole or Dorothy, if you guys have any sort of parting thoughts about the village, and then Jeff, I think maybe having you, if there's a short story of Clara Brown that comes to mind that sort of speaks to the vision of the women's village, and maybe ending on that note. But let's have Cole and Dorothy, if you guys can give a final thought, if there's no other questions.
Yeah. Since sorry, Cole, that you had to conduct the whole slideshow, but just just another introduction. I'm available if anyone has questions in regards to the Women's Village that come up later. You can reach me at the phone number that is provided, or the email as well. Again, we have an open line of communication that we are definitely willing to answer any questions that come about. And that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Dorothy said. My email was actually on the slides, as well as my phone number, so you guys can text, call, or email me if you have any questions or concerns.
And finally, we'll be adding this recording to our website. So that's coloradovillagecollaborative.org. And then there's a Women's Village page in particular. And so we'll be adding this to our website. So please direct your neighbors to it so they can find out more information. Please reach out to us so we have your contact information. We want to be a solid part of the neighborhood. We really want to activate a vacant lot and bring life and light to it. And we want to be a part of the long story of Clara Brown Commons and uplifting this site. And so we're grateful to you all. And we look forward to getting to know you better in the days ahead.
Levi wanted me to close with a story about Clara Brown. There's so many stories about Aunt Clara that inspire us to do the kind of work that we do. I've been studying her life for a long time, but in the last year or so, I've been particularly inspired by a story from the end of her life. She lived to be between 80 and 82 years old. She spent the first 56 years of her life as a slave, and then was given the opportunity to purchase her own freedom. All the great work that she did to make an enormous difference in Colorado came in the final really 20 years of her life, which is really remarkable. But when she was something like 79 years old, she heard about a group of people that history now calls the exodusters. And these were former slaves, African Americans, who were leaving the South and going up to Kansas territory, on the promise that they would have an opportunity for land and to create their own farms. But when they got there, they found out that none of the opportunities that they had been promised were real. And so thousands of these people ended up just gathering in small towns that couldn't support them. Many of them were starving to death and ill and without really hope or sustenance. And word about that went out across the country. And who would lead the response but a 79-year-old woman with lots of health problems, and who, by the way, at that time in life had already given away most of her fortune to help other people. But with whatever little resources she still had left, Clara left Colorado, went to Kansas, and spent 6 months caring, just nursing and caring and feeding these families until they could find some place to go, maybe in Kansas or maybe to somewhere else. Some of them came to Colorado. But it's just remarkable to me. We think about all the struggles and all the things that we see going on around us in the world. Who's going to respond? And it's easy for all of us, myself included, to think, I hope somebody does something about that. I hope somebody responds. I guess we wouldn't maybe think that a 79-year-old woman who has her own struggle with health and poverty would be the one to respond and to go give her life away to care for others. But it sure inspires me that that's the kind of person that Clara Brown was. It's why we want to build a community that lifts up her memory permanently.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's the reason why we started, naming it after Aunt Clara. This is Clara Brown Commons, and before there was even a rendering, we started with a name, which is kind of the opposite of how a lot of construction and development gets done. But I want to thank everybody for coming tonight and to just reiterate that if you do have the screen up, that there is information on the on contact information for both Dorothy and Hannah, as well as the website there. And that we will be putting the recording of this webinar on the website on coloradovillagecollaborative.org with the Women's Village tab, as well as on myclarabrowncommons.com. And we'll be following up with an email. So make sure that we have your information if you haven't received anything from us. But I want to end just by rereading the vision statement for Clara Brown Commons based on that story of Aunt Clara. Clara Brown Commons promotes belonging for residents and our neighbors by creating a safe and caring community where we can stabilize our lives, expand our economic capacity, and deepen spiritual connectedness. Thanks everybody for coming through tonight.
Good night.
Thank you guys.
Good night.